Hello, hello. Scott Sherrick here, Executive HR Advisor with HR Boost. Today's training is called Beginning Your Leadership Journey. Whether you're a new manager or veteran manager, this training contains principles and strategies that I'm confident will be useful to you. There's a lot of content to cover today, so I'll be presenting material in 4 sections, each ending with an intermission slide containing action points and practice exercises. I do this because both you and I know the most effective learning is always followed by doing. We have a lot to cover. Let's get started. A little about the source material of this presentation. Much of today's content is based on the writings of John C. Maxwell. Many sources like Inc. magazine and the American Management Association widely consider John Maxwell to be one of the most influential leadership experts in the world. He's often called the top leadership authority. That's because Maxwell is an expert and extensive writer and speaker, and also he focuses on developing leaders across various industries. Today I want to talk to you about 4 areas related to leadership. They are your leadership journey, which includes a leader's greatest challenge, leadership defined and the shift required, 4 key roles of a leader, and how to become a student of behavior. You know, growth always starts with self-examination. You must know yourself to grow yourself. And it becomes a reality when we take initiative. Growth doesn't just happen. Action is required. I've worked in human resources for about 25 years, and I've trained and coached hundreds of staff and leaders. In 2021, I attended training to grow as a coach and trainer. I did this as part of my leadership growth journey. Here's what I learned. Leadership is not that complicated. Don't let it overwhelm you. Chris Robinson, Vice President of the John Maxwell team and the main trainer of coaches, often repeated, all growth happens in small steps taken daily. Therefore, learn a little, do a little. Learn a little, do a little. A leader's greatest challenge. John Maxwell is often asked, what's your greatest leadership challenge? His reply, if I could kick in the pants the person who caused me the most grief as a leader, I wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. Oh. So our greatest battle is leading ourselves. Here are 4 areas to focus on as we lead ourselves. Learn followership. Develop self-discipline. Practice patience. Seek accountability. Let's take a deeper dive on these 4 areas. So in leading ourselves, we need to learn followership. Bishop Fulton Sheen remarked once, civilization is always in danger when those who have never learned to obey are given the right to command. Good followers know how to lead others well. Good followers understand the follower's world. Leaders who have not followed well tend to be prideful, unrealistic, rigid, and autocratic. The best leaders know sometimes we lead and sometimes we serve. Develop self-discipline. It's said that Frederick the Great of Persia was walking along the outskirts of Berlin when he encountered a very old man walking straight towards him in the opposite direction. Who are you? Frederick asked. I'm a king, the man said. A king? Frederick laughed. Over what kingdom do you reign? Over myself, said the proud old man. In our immaturity, we want to conquer the world. When we are wise, we want to conquer ourselves. Self-discipline begins with a decision to start a new habit, followed by an action, regardless of how you feel. Next, practice patience. Leaders can be remarkable by being one step ahead. They look ahead, they move ahead, and being one step ahead makes you a leader. However, that can also be something bad, because there's no instant greatness. You know, we're used to instant oatmeal, call ahead coffee, microwave popcorn, instant answers from Google. Good leadership doesn't work that way. Good leadership is a crock-pot preposition. Leading well is not about crossing the finish line first. It's about taking people across the finish line with you. Last, but probably the most important, is seek accountability. It begins by admitting your weaknesses. This builds trust with people. It builds trust because people see your weaknesses and they know you're honest about them. Embrace realistic people. In 2003, I led a campus teamwork initiative and I formed a committee. I picked both good team players and whiners from among the staff. This definitely helped with the realistic results that we achieved. Ask for honesty, a Harry Truman story. Following his inauguration, Rayburn, Speaker of the House, pulled him aside and said, "From here on out, Harry, you're going to have lots of people around you. They'll try to put a wall around you and cut you off from the ideas of others. They'll tell you you're a great man, Harry, but you know as well as I do, you aren't." Listen to and try to find value in hard criticism. Early in my HR career, after a very inadequate presentation of a new policy before a college leadership team, sweated that one, I was harshly criticized by my supervisor. Harshly criticized. Over the weekend that followed, I thought seriously about quitting. And then I said to myself, if you do what he says, will you be better? But he shouldn't have been so harsh. No. If you do what he says, will you be better? Yes or no? Yes, I finally thought. When I returned on Monday, I wrote the following quote as a reminder, and I put it in a very visible place in my office. If excellence is my direction, I'm receptive to correction, no matter how it is delivered. If excellence is my direction, I'm receptive to correction, no matter how it's delivered. Do you want to be excellent? Open the door to criticism. And then finally, find an accountability partner, a boss, a peer, a trusted subordinate. Do you have one? Intermission. Here's some action points to consider for your growth. Number 2, leadership defined, the shift required. You know, stepping into leadership requires a shift in mindset from being a soloist, a subject matter expert, a project finisher, an effective worker, focused time working. The shift in mindset is to a conductor mindset, an overseer of experts, a projects coordinator, someone who leads effective workers, and someone who focuses time in leading. Leadership defined. I think there's two sides of leadership in general. This training is a mix to address both, but with more of an emphasis on the first. The first is the relational side of leadership. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Relational influence. And then there's the tactical side. Stephen Covey said, effective leadership is putting first things first. Effective management is discipline, carrying it out. You know, we need to become skilled in both. The primary aim of relational leadership is this: to add value to others. Here's a great quote from Robert Gross, former president of Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, who once explained to his supervisors this: it's one thing to build a product, it's another to build a company, because companies are nothing more than people, and the things that come out of them are no better than the people themselves. We don't build automobiles, airplanes, refrigerators, and radios. We build people. It's the people who build the product. I love that. Add value to others. Focus on adding value daily. Add as much value as possible, as often as possible. Never wait to add value. Give without keeping score so motives stay pure. And then finally, welcome any return as an unexpected blessing. Here are some action points during an intermission for you to consider for your growth. Now I'm going to talk about 4 key roles of a leader. An effective leader is a communicator, one who serves, a navigator, and a coach. Let's take a deeper dive into these 4. A communicator connects. The single most important skill of a leader is to be a good communicator. This comes from a book called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. I highly recommend this book to you. So here are a few ways to connect. Number 1, find common ground in what you do, similar places you've been, things you like and dislike. Keep it simple. Work towards keeping your speech organized, clear, concise, and timely. Becoming a good communicator can be learned. Keep practicing. Practice reflective listening. This is foundational. Focus on understanding. Ask lots of questions. Listen and then summarize what you've heard. Paul Tillich, one writer, said, "The first duty of love is to listen." And then finally, live what you communicate. Be authentic. Keep things on the table. The second area of leadership is service. It's the spirit of leadership. Leaders touch the heart before they ask for a hand. This starts with knowing your people's needs. I've been in a habit of, in my one-to-one meetings with subordinates, to learn their MBTI, their strength finders, their DISC, preferences, strengths, weaknesses, what they enjoy most and least about their work, and then I share mine. It's been a good practice, very productive. Regularly support people, and that means in successes and failures. Jackie Robinson, an American baseball hero and the first black major league player, was often faced with jeering, threats, and abuse. One day he made an error on his home field in Brooklyn, New York. Yikes! Fans ridiculed him. Shortstop Pee Wee Herman then came up to him, put his arm around him, and faced the crowd. The fans grew quiet. Robinson later said that Reese's arm around him saved his career. Regularly support people. And then go to where they are. Tom Peters once said this: "The #1 managerial productivity problem in America is quite simply managers who are out of touch with their people and out of touch with their customers. And then finally, offer hope regularly. I want to share with you a little bit later a story about a former supervisor of mine named Les Glore that unpacks this really well. A leader is a navigator. They chart the course. A navigator is one who sees more than others see, who sees farther than others see, and who sees before others do. It's a quote from Leroy Imes. A navigator is also a planner. They plan ahead. They're process-oriented. I want to give you an acrostic that will help you in your planning. Predetermine a course. Lay out your goals. Align with your priorities. Notify key personnel. That's an important piece. Ahead. Allow time to embrace. Another very important piece. Getting people on board. Head into action. Expect problems. Always point to successes. And this, I want to just underline this. This is I think one of the most important pieces. You know, you learn a little, you do a little, you take what you can get as close to what you want, and you keep moving forward, and then you celebrate those. And then daily review your plan. And finally, a leader is a coach. There are 5 skills that I want to talk to you about. You know, this is probably the broadest area of daily leadership work. And we could really dive deeply on this, but I'm just going to cover 5 skills briefly. The first is that a coach is a motivator. They call others to action. They encourage collaborative work. They're the voice of expectation. Next, a coach is a teacher. First, a learner. They seek to understand others, then to teach to their style, and they're a focused skill developer, both proactively and reactively. Next, a coach is an evaluator. Assess and monitor work, provide caring input. And when you self-evaluate and lead by example, this is probably one of the most important pieces of your success as an evaluator. Next, a coach is an encourager. Be intentional. Observe, affirm, give shout-outs. Remember and affirm successes. Regularly say thank you. Some years ago, I read a book called Balcony People, and you know, the title says it all. A balcony person stands in the balcony and cheers on the performers. That's what a coach does. Instead of being a basement dweller and watching things circle the drain. And then finally, the 5th skill is be a problem solver. A problem solver identifies and removes obstacles. They lead in collaborative problem solving, emphasis on the word collaborative. And I want to, at this point, just challenge you to join me in removing the mama bird, baby bird syndrome. People expect you as a leader to solve their problems. Instead, say to them, next time you bring a problem, bring 3 solutions along so that we can discuss those solutions. And in doing so, you're additionally helping them develop. A coach's foundation. Trust is the foundation of good coaching. Character makes people trust you, and trust makes leadership possible. Time for intermission. Here's some action points to consider for your growth journey. Next, become a student of behavior. I want to address this because there are many among us who are leaders who are very logical, very sequential, and might not have the relational skills that are important in leadership, and they have a difficult time making judgments about relationally charged matters. So I want to give you some tips and some thoughts about doing that. And I'm going to start with the logical side. You know, the study of behavior is a science in which logic and math at times is used. 1936, a behavioral scientist named Kurt Lewin came up with the following behavioral equation that you might be able to use. B equals F, parentheses P and E. So let me unpack that. Behavior is a function of the whole range of information or data points from the person, all aspects of the person, their past, present, and expectations of the future, and their environment, physical environment and social environment. So keep these things in mind. To effectively lead, you need to know your people. Understanding people involves observing and connecting behavioral data points. Years ago, I sat under a young, very emotionally intelligent pastor, and I was so impressed. I would watch him talk to people, and one of the things I observed was that he gathered behavioral data points, and then he would come up with behavioral patterns which then informed the solutions that he gave. He was remarkable. People wanted to talk with him often. To gather behavioral data points, ask questions like these. What are their strengths and weaknesses? What motivates them, gets them up in the morning? What do they struggle with most? What comes easiest to them? These are some of the questions you should ask to understand behavior. And you can grow in this skill. And so let me encourage you. So, as I've said, knowing people is part of leading well. So let's get practical. When faced with a performance concern of one of your people, carefully consider the following. I like to call these the 4 Ps. They're steps for a performance-related investigation. What does the policy say? Does it address the problem specifically or generally? What's the procedure? Again, is it specific? Does it relate to the person's behavior, or is it a general statement? What's been the precedent? Precedence is action taken outside of the policies and procedures, how people have in your company have handled gray areas, and it's important to be consistent and be informed on that issue. And then after collecting this information, then ask, how does this apply to the person? You know, addressing performance concerns often requires a judgment call. There is no if-then chart, which is one of the biggest challenges for leaders. It's the application of policy, procedure, precedents to a person. Those who have wisdom in knowing the person and how to apply it are the best leaders. But it doesn't require a judgment call that you'll need to make. So carefully considering the person will help form an informed judgment. This is part of your job, informed judgments. Things to consider regarding Bill or Susan. Here's some additional questions and specific to the issue that you're dealing with. Are they new on the job or the task? From what you know about them, what is the possible intent that they had? Have they struggled with a work, relational, or personal issue recently? Or have they been annoyed, feeling unsupported, or overwhelmed? The bottom line here is caring for people is key in leading well. I want to tell you a story now about Les Glore that I referred to a little bit earlier. You know, Les always used a three-step approach when I failed at something. I like to call it ESP. Les had ESP, and he had a great smile, by the way. His sister was a dentist, and oh my gosh, this guy smiled and just lit up the room. Anyway, ESP, empathy. He always identified with me from his own experience. If I failed at something, he'd tell a story about something he failed with that was similar. Sympathy. He acknowledged the challenge I faced, the feeling of it, the weight of it, perhaps the newness of it. And then finally, he always exercised patience. He always gave me a chance or chances to try again. Les Glore, ESP. Remember that. Henry Ford once said about failure, failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. I've had that on my wall for years. I love that phrase. Failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Here's a great book for you to read on this subject. I think it'll help you personally, and it'll help the people that you lead. It's called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. Just that phrase, it's the title, but just that phrase has helped me change my perspective towards failure. And that book is chocked full of examples of people who failed, learned, and then became remarkable because of the learning. Written by John Maxwell. So, knowing where the person is internally will help you decide what action to take when you're addressing a performance concern. When addressing a concern, here is an effective progression of actions to consider. Is a reminder or additional learning or training warranted? Will coaching focused on practice be an effective path? You know, in the U.S. military, if an officer sees a sergeant who evaluates one of their troops, rate that person below average in a particular area, the lieutenant is required to ask if there has been coaching sessions that have occurred. 3 coaching sessions is generally required. Let's take that as a good example. Is correction required, i.e., shining a light on the problem and the solutions, which is the words behind my head? Is reproving the individual the best solution? A stern warning. Do you need to start the corrective action or the discipline process? Informal discussion, written warning, etc. Well, here's our final intermission and some action points for you to use in your growth. So this ends our training for today. That was a lot of material, wasn't it? So let me briefly review what we've covered. Your leadership journey. You've got a lot of growth ahead of you. Don't let it overwhelm you. Leadership is not that complicated. Growth happens in small steps taken daily, so learn a little and do a little. Your greatest challenge as a leader is going to be leading yourself. And there's 4 areas to work on when you improve your own self-leadership. 1 is learning followership. 2, developing self-discipline. 3, practicing patience. And 4, seeking accountability. And let me encourage you that that last one become a very important to do from today's training. We talked about leadership defined, the idea that leaders are both relational and tactical, and the best leaders are strong in both areas. And we talked about a shift that's required for new leaders, a shift from thinking of their work as a soloist and thinking of their work as a conductor, and how they allocate their time and where their focus is. Next, we talked about the 4 roles of a leader. The role of being a good communicator, being one who serves, being a navigator, and being a coach. And then we talked about becoming a student of behavior. And this one is one of the areas that helps people who tend to be more logical, sequential, not as relationally strong, by observing behavioral data points and thinking through the behaviors that your people exhibit in patterns. This will actually help you when you address performance concerns, because they'll know that you've really thought about them and listened to them and observed and know them. Well, thank you very much for this time. Thank you for your patience. I hope this is helpful to you. I'm going to just quickly show a few other slides and explain those as additional resources. One resource would be to set a date and go through the 30-day growth plan. It's simple, practical, and doable. On this link at johnmaxwell.com, it's called Start Your Journey. Take the leadership evaluation. That could be very helpful. Next, here's some growth resources. I've listed several of the books that I've used in this presentation. The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, Developing the Leader Within You. This is a great primer and a starting point. Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. Leader Shift, which talks more in depth about the difference between being a soloist and being a conductor. And then Becoming a Person of Influence. This again is one of those basic relational leader texts that can be very helpful. And I also mentioned one other book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. That's probably my favorite. I also want to encourage you to think about taking the assessment test on the website called The 6 Types of Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni, very well-known leadership expert, and a fascinating study of the strengths that we bring to the table and how those influence team activity. Scott Sherrick, Executive HR Advisor with HR Boost, and I challenge you to excel as a leader. I wish you a successful leadership journey. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you.